Stand up for righteousness. Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth.
I truly believe that thoughts are the greatest vehicle to change.
We do not care whether the cat is black or white, as long as it can catch mice.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Victory in spite of all terror. Victory however long and hard the road may be.
To those waiting with bated breath for that favourite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
If I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, is a quote by the American industrialist Henry Ford, who pioneered the mass production of automobiles in the early 20th century and founded the Ford Motor Company. I thought this was an apt quote for our guest today, one of Australia's more experienced board directors who is chairman of 3 ASX-listed companies, including SiteMinder, TechnologyOne and Car Group. Our guest today is Pat O'Sullivan. Pat had a distinguished executive career, serving as Chief Financial Officer of Goodman Field in New Zealand, Chief Financial Officer of Singtel Optus, and Chief Operating Officer and Financial Director of Nine Entertainment. Thereafter, Pat transitioned into a board career and has served as a non-executive director of IINet, Isentia, APN Outdoor, Marley Spoon and Afterpay, and is currently chairman of the non-for-profit group Dreams to Live For. Hello and welcome to another episode of No Limitations, a show where we speak to elite, world-class performing men and women and unlock the secrets and influences that have shaped their destinies and that you could apply to your own life. For our first-time listeners from all over the world, please don't forget to follow on your preferred podcast platform and share with your friends and colleagues. And for our listeners in Brazil, Germany and Korea, a big hello. I am your host, Greg Robinson, Managing Partner of Blenheim Partners Board and Executive Search Firm. In a compelling discussion, Pat contends that Australia remains the lucky country, defined by abundant prosperity, an irrepressible entrepreneurial spirit, and stable political leadership. He asserts that Australia is ready for a grand, big-picture vision to galvanise the nation and ensure that it succeeds in the decades ahead. Pat discusses his executive role at Singtel Optus in a fast-changing, high-growth and intensely competitive environment where he learned the importance of building close professional relationships and an extensive network of contacts. Pat shares some tales from his tenure at PBL and Nine Entertainment, including a confronting interview with business and media tycoon Kerry Packer, as well as working alongside James Packer, Eddie McGuire and David Gingell. Lastly, Pat speaks about his passion for sport and the transferable lessons for political and business leaders, and he expresses optimism for the future of Australia. So sit back and enjoy. Ripe for improvement. Pat, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Nice to meet you.
As chairman of 3 ASX-listed companies, do you think the federal government or governments in general are doing enough to promote, in this country, economic growth and support those taking risks?
So probably the short answer would be, I think they could do more. The longer answer probably starts from the premise that I think a lot of Australians can forget that we do live in a lucky country. I came out here 30-odd years ago from Ireland.
Yep.
And I've never wanted to go and live anywhere else. I think the economy we live in for that 30-odd years has been pretty stable. There's been lots of opportunities for people who want opportunities. Unemployment has been low over a long period of time. And I think there are huge opportunities still for this country. However, I do think those in politics are probably slightly hamstrung by a couple of things. One is 3-year terms. It feels like they're barely in and they're worrying about getting re-elected.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of factions, as we all know.
Mm.
And I also think the phenomenon of social media must make life very difficult because every single little thing you do, positive or negative, is getting picked up on a camera somewhere and getting reported. So with that as the backdrop, federal government can do better. I think for the first 20-odd years I was in this country, so I was sort of late 80s into the 90s, into 2000, I think we were well served by our leaders.
Yeah. Oh, it's the Hawke and Keating days?
Hawke, Keating, Howard.
Howard, yep.
And I think for the last 15-odd years, unfortunately, I just don't think we've had a really strong leader who's set a framework, set a vision, and try to stick to it.
What's business done about it, Pat? Do you think they've pushed it enough as an opportunity? Because we can all sit on the sideline and do exactly what you just said and made some constructive commentary. But have we tried to engage with the PMs or the ministers well enough?
I can only speak for the companies I've been involved with, and where necessary, government's generally good at listening. Mm-hmm. The question is, how much action will they take from what you're talking about? But I think despite government, Australian companies have done tremendously well. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the entrepreneurial space over the last 10, 15 years of my career. And, I think it's amazing, the global phenomenons that we've created out of Australia, perhaps despite the government.
So what are the big ones, Pat? What's the ones that's really taking you aback?
Yeah, so I sit back and I think about companies like ResMed, CSL, Cochlear.
Yes.
In the medical space. Then you think about Atlassian, Canva, the software space. And then obviously I play in the marketplace space with Car Group. You got REA, you got Seek.
Yeah.
There's just some phenomenal, they're all global companies. And they've come out of Australia. And we like to talk about other countries perhaps being more entrepreneurial than we are. But I think we've done, in terms of our population size, I think we've done tremendously well.
And do you really think there is the spirit of entrepreneurism in this country? Do you think there's enough support for it?
So there's definitely the spirit of entrepreneurism. Is there enough support for it? I think in the last 10 years, there's a lot more money in VC and private equity coming into the country.
Yep.
So that helps.
Yep.
Again, back to government. Does government really support it? No, they don't. Do they really understand it? I don't know. But as I say, despite that, the companies we've seen start in this country and become international phenomenons, and I didn't mention Afterpay, which I should have.
Yes.
In the financial tech space, it's just great.
So, look, hypothetical, if you were PM for a day, what would you do to support this growth agenda?
Look, it's easy to say something. What I'd love to think I would do is actually set a vision.
Yeah.
And then talk about a plan, at its broadest level around, how will I support that vision? So that vision's growth for the country, then what is the infrastructure changes they're going to make in terms of, roads, schooling, health, education, really just building a plan and then trying to get people on board to say that is a good long-term plan, a good, 5 to 10-year plan. And regardless of whether I'm the Prime Minister for the next term or not, people would see that in that plan is a future for this country. That's what I would try and do.
And what sort of future are we looking at here, Pat? Where are we going to spend the time in technology?
Yeah.
Where's the opportunity for Australia?
I think we're an incredibly smart country.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's for education and everything else?
Education.
Yeah.
I think there's a real spirit of get up and go and have a crack.
Do we still have that?
I think we do.
Okay.
All the companies I've been involved with for the last decade as a director, 2/3 of them have been companies that were started by Australians. Didn't exist, 10 years ago, and now they're, as I said earlier, global phenomenons. I think that shows we absolutely have. We've got very smart people. We do have people who want to get up and have a crack. Mm-hmm. So, I think the foundations are strong. For me, I don't see any reason why the population of this country can't and shouldn't continue to grow. As I said, it's a great place to live. The climate's fantastic. The environment's fantastic. If you look at the different ethnic backgrounds of people in this country and we all sort of operate broadly, effectively together, it's just a great place.
Cost of doing business?
It's expensive. And regulation, I think, is probably the biggest cost at the moment for business.
Yeah.
Red tape, small business, it must be incredibly hard.
Swamped.
Absolutely swamped, yeah. I got a couple of mates who've set up in the cafes and restaurants. And just when you sit there and you listen to them talking about it, you think you're talking about BHP in terms of the red tape. So that's really, really, really tough. So, that's an area where I think if we want small business to flourish, then, government has to listen and has to take some of that away.
So what's that point of difference? You're talking technology. You're across a lot of technology companies. And I guess, the biggest thing we're ever hearing about now is the AI revolution. So what do you foresee happening in that whole broader space?
Yeah. So to me, AI is a bit of a buzz term at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, certainly the technology companies that I've been involved with have all used AI for a period of time.
Okay.
I think generative AI is clearly the one that's evolving. But a tech company not using AI isn't a tech company. The question is, older fashioned companies, perhaps bigger companies, they definitely can use more AI and catch up, if you like, with what technology companies have been doing. Mm-hmm. But no, I think there's an exciting future in many ways. One of the challenges we're going to have is going to be around how do we manage fake news? Because at the end of the day, you're seeing that already in terms of social media, what is real? Well, AI just compounds that problem. So I think for people to work out where do I get information from that actually is accurate and factual is going to become more challenging for people.
Cost of energy? Any comments there? Because it is hurting a lot of corporates.
Oh, no, absolutely, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, why is that an issue for us in this country, given our natural resources?
Yeah.
Yeah? I mean, again, I don't want to get into the detail of it. Obviously, others will explain it far better than me, but, we've got gas,
just stuns you,
coal. It's just stunning. So again, back to your first question of me in terms of...
this is part of the vision.
The vision, yeah?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I always say to people, if you set a realistic North Star, a realistic goal that people can sort of look and say, I think that's possible, and then build a plan to get there, then people will get there, yeah? So I don't think there are too many people in the world today who don't accept the fact that our planet is under some pressure. So green is important, yeah?
Yeah, okay.
But setting goals that are just not achievable in any form, shape, or otherwise without shutting down the grid, people just look at that and just are cynical about it. Yeah. To me, therefore, setting a vision that says, yes, over a reasonably long period of time, we are going to get to a better carbon position in this country, and building companies as part of that plan to say, come on a journey with us. You tell us what we're putting to you is not going to work, but tell us what else we can do to make it work, I think will help manage energy prices. But there's no doubt for today, it's a real problem for companies, but more importantly for individuals.
Where are you from originally, Pat?
So I grew up in Dublin, in Ireland. Spent the first 23 years of my life there.
During some pretty heavy times in those days?
No, I mean, the Republic of Ireland was a wonderful place to live. It was bloody wet. I'm huge into my sport, so I spent a lot of time with, knee deep in mud playing football and all sorts of football. I was very fortunate, grew up in a family of 5 kids. My dad had a shop as basically the equivalent of a small IGA.
Oh, yeah.
And I worked there.
You learned all about customer then?
From the age of 5. I worked there till I was 20, every single day of the week.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, literally every single day of the week, yeah.
All right, what's the big trick on customer? What was the telltale which has already remained with you?
The fascinating thing, so we're rolling back, I'm just turned 60 years of age, so we're going back a while, yeah?
Yep. But some of them remain, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. So my dad could talk the hind legs off a donkey, and he had this relationship with the customers, yeah? The students came in and they had no money, so they'd buy their 1 egg and their, half a sliced pan and a bit of cheese and whatever else, and Dad had put it in the book.
Oh, really?
And they could pay at the end of the month when they got their money. Other people, Dad would deliver the box of goodies to their house. And what was really interesting, people talk about disruption. I can still see my dad's health deteriorate when the first supermarket opened up 100 metres down the road. And literally overnight, all of these loyal customers that he had come into the shop just disappeared because the supermarket had a bigger offering. It was a bit cheaper. And at the end of the day, that unfortunately was, from his health perspective, that was a massive, massive hit to him.
So in the organisations you're in, they're all very customer focused.
Mm-hmm.
From those learnings, what sticks then? Is it price? Is it stickiness with customer? What?
I think it's value at the end of the day.
Yeah, right.
We sit around all of my board tables and we always talk about price increases. And do we have a reason and a right to increase price? Clearly, if your cost base is going up and inflation's a bit higher than it has been for the last couple of years,
yep,
then your shareholders are looking at you saying, how do you make a profit? So you have to think about price rises.
Yep.
And I think where we've landed, certainly on most of the companies I'm involved with, is regular, predictable price increases, but at the same time, improving your product to demonstrate more value for your customers, ultimately is received far better than, hey, Greg, you're getting a 5% this year, because that's what we do.
You chose accounting.
Yeah, it's a ridiculously stupid story.
There's not too many people from the UK or Ireland actually choose that when they go to university.
Yeah, I didn't go to university. That's the funny story. So I was enrolled to go to university in Dublin. I was going on a football scholarship. And I went up to my old school. I was asked by the head brother of sport, would I come and play, even though I'd left the school? So probably not something I should have done, but he asked me to do it. So we'd known each other over the years. So I turned up and I played this game for the school. And again, a muddy, wet day. And I'm leaving the grounds on my push bike. And the headmaster comes out and he says, oh, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, don't worry about it. I just had to kick a footy and whatever else, and didn't want to get into it and get the head of sport in trouble. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going to UCD to do a commerce degree. I said, yeah, I thought that. He said, actually, there's an accounting firm up the road. This is literally 1:00 on a Friday afternoon.
And you're covered in mud.
I'm covered in mud. He said, there's an accounting firm just up the road, and they contacted us to say that they had 3 people signed up to go in as article clerks from the school.
Yep.
One's pulled out. They've got a spot. Would you be interested? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, you've got literally till 5:00 if you're interested. I said, well, look at me, like, what am I going to do? And he said, no. He said, they're fine. He said, you can jump on the phone and have a chat to them. You don't need to go and see them. So I went back to the school and jumped on the phone and had a chat to one of the partners, and he talked through the opportunity. I thought, oh, that's really interesting. So what was attractive, if I'm honest, when I was 17 years old was money. Yeah. I was going to get paid straight away. Possibly, if I'm honest. And my dad, God bless him, has passed away, so he won't hear this. But I enjoyed working in the shop to a point, but I wasn't getting paid much money. So we had the chat. I had a good chat. It's probably now 3 o'clock. And he said, okay, I'm sorry to pressure you, but you got to tell me by 5 o'clock because I got to register you to get in. I said, no worries. Anyway, I was with a girlfriend at the time who's still she's my wife now, and she lived not far from the school. So I cycled down on my bike to her. She was 16. I went in and I said to her, this is the opportunity I have. So basically I gave up going to university and jump in as an article clerk in an accounting firm. And she, of course, rolled her eyes, threw her hands in the air and said, well, good luck, do what you want to do. So I signed up. That's the story of how I became an accountant. So I joined as an article clerk, and then I did my chartered accounting studies at night, part-time.
Not easy.
And that was a 7-year journey. But it was a wonderful journey, yeah.
Size of the firm?
100 people.
So you got everything?
Oh, mate, the first job I got was the shoebox.
Yeah.
I literally got the shoebox.
All the dockets and all the receipts.
Basically create the ledgers. And it held me in good stead. And I still think it holds me in good stead to today. Not that I spend a huge amount of time on accounting issues today, but certainly through my corporate career as an executive held me in great stead. Just knowing when somebody was talking about stuff from an accounting perspective, I actually understood literally the basics.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing from what I've seen in your career, you've moved across industry so easily. I think that is an enormous advantage with the background of a CFO. Mm-hmm. Have you ever found it difficult in understanding a business model, or is it something once you just bend your back, do some reading, you can pick it up?
Yeah, look, I'm a huge advocate of people doing what I have done. And it's not because I've done it. I just think there's huge advantage in asking what may appear to be a dumb question, but actually companies do things the same way because that's how they've always done them. So with a fresh set of eyes saying, can I just test how you do that? Can actually really go, that's interesting. So in terms of me moving across, probably the biggest transition for me was moving when I joined Optus. I was working with Goodman Fielder. Again, true story. I was in New Zealand. I went to New Zealand for 2 years as a quid pro quo for something else that I think we'll talk about in a second. And I was the CFO over there, and I got this phone call from somebody like you saying, Pat, Singtel has just acquired Optus, and they're looking for a new CFO. And I honestly laughed. I knew the guy who'd called me, and I just laughed at him. I said, I think you got the wrong person.
Yeah, you're Goodman Fielder.
I said, I cannot spell telecommunications. I honestly do not know how to spell the word. And he said, no, it's definitely you. They're interested. And I said, why? And there was the treasurer at Optus I'd worked with at Burns Philp in a previous life.
Yep.
So he'd put my name forward. Anyway, cut a long story short, I joined, and I was fortunate with hindsight that my family were in New Zealand, and because of the kids, we didn't want to move them out of school till the end of term. So I came and sort of was commuting between New Zealand and Australia, but I had no family here in Australia for the first 6 months I was at Optus. So I could absolutely just bury myself and not worry about having to get home.
Yep.
Because it was hardest because of A, it was very different to what anything I'd done. But secondly, the acronyms, honest to God, I literally had about 40 bits of paper in front of me that used to have the acronyms written on them. Because I'd go to some meetings and it was literally just acronym after acronym. And I'd be sitting there going, I have no idea what you're talking about. But it was a classic example of being able to bring some of the skills I'd learned in other industries into that environment and say, I know you've done it this way for the last 10 years, but maybe there's a better way of actually doing it.
Just going back a little bit there, undergraduate, didn't do it. Has it ever come against you?
Never.
I'm amazed how many organisations ask us to look at that as a search firm, as opposed to the background and what they've achieved or where they're going in that case. You don't see it still as a...
Not at all. I mean, at the end, people do education differently, right?
Yeah. So how did you go about yours?
So my education was simple. Like I say, I learned on the job, so I'm literally on the tools.
Yep.
I rolled back to my old man. I was in his shop for 20 years. I learned a huge amount, just a massive amount. And then I did my chartered accountancy studies.
Yep.
And then I did a fair bit of business reading, but then also I was fortunate enough to go to Harvard for 3 months.
Yep. Good point. Good for you.
I don't use this term often, but it was life-changing.
Why?
That experience was life-changing. So I was...
How old were you?
36 years old.
Yep.
It was the advanced management program, which I say went for 3 months. I was the youngest person on the course, and there was 167 other people. And literally the way it's set up is you're in a room, if you can think of it, sort of a dorm with a big sitting room, and there's 8 per room. And at the very beginning of the course, there's an accountant per, I didn't realise this, but there was an accountant per room. Yep.
Okay.
So 1 in 8 were accountants. We were called aside and we were told that the first 3 weeks would be hell for us because all of the case studies we were going to do were going to be financially oriented. And the other 7 people in our room would not know in the main what was going on. So they'd be leaning heavily on us to actually help them understand. And that's exactly how it played out. And it was fascinating. And this is back in 2000, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So, I'd bring my wife every few nights, whatever else, and have a chat. And she said, it's 3 a.m. What are you doing? When's the exam? I said, there are no exams. But I said, I'm not letting my team down. I said, I'm here. We've got to get this case study done because we're going to present it tomorrow. And it was just this, it was really hard to explain at the time. The 168 of us, with probably 8 exceptions, and we all knew who the 8 were, fully engaged in this course because we were all learning. And there were some big people there, big CEOs, big COOs, big CFOs from global companies. So the big takeout for me, Greg, from that was I could participate in these conversations. And that just gave me confidence, I guess, when I came back to Goodman Fielder and didn't stay very long and moved on from there.
Did you apply it? Have you applied it since? Or how have you applied it?
Oh, I think just the power of understanding connections.
Yep.
The power of understanding great leaders and seeing them for 3 months and how they operated with a bunch of strangers.
So what stood out?
The listening piece and then finding consensus. So even in our little group of 8 people, probably within a day, it was obvious to me who the leader was going to be. And he wasn't in any way verbose. He was just more about, Greg, I think 4 o'clock we probably should have a chat as a group. So we all got 3 hours then to sort of read the case study. Really, okay, we'll do that. Nobody argued that. That's all good. We come in then. And we come in at 4 o'clock, we sit down, and he wouldn't be top of the table going, I must be there, I must be there. He'd just let it go for a little bit. And when it was kind of a bit disjointed, he'd sort of bring it all together. And it was just slowly. And over the 3 months, it was very obvious that, this, as he was, a big leader.
So how did you depart the shores of Ireland?
So I grew up in Ireland, and you'd go to a pub quiz, and one of the questions in the pub quiz was, which European country's got the highest unemployment rate and what is it?
Oh, okay, right.
And the answer was Ireland, and it was more than 20%. So interestingly, at the time...
It's tough.
No, it was tough, and I'd never experienced it because I worked for my dad, and then I was working
20%,
in accounting.
was it?
Yeah, around 20%, yeah.
Gee, it makes Australia look good, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Ireland was agriculture, it was tourism, was heavily reliant on what was called the EEC, now the EU at that time.
Yep.
But I can't remember who the Prime Minister was at the time, or the Taoiseach as we call it. But he came out and he said, for those who are just finishing 3rd level education, go overseas. We're going to change the environment of this country. We're going to change the tax laws, and we're going to attract foreign investment into Ireland.
Yes.
I was 17, 18 years of age, mate. That's just noise, right? You don't really hear it. But with hindsight, that vision that they set out then, they absolutely delivered on in spades, to the extent that Ireland is probably the most prosperous country in the EU at the moment. So I was part of that exodus. Myself and my wife had just got married. We decided we'd do something for 2 years. I went off and did an interview in London, got offered a job with Pricewaterhouse in Bermuda or in Sydney. And God bless, we thought Bermuda would be exciting, but probably Sydney felt a bit more career-focused. And then I was offered a job in one of 5 offices in PW in Sydney. So we're talking 1988, 87 in fact. So I pull out the atlas in the library. Australia's in the bottom right-hand corner.
That's right.
And right in the middle of Sydney is where? Parramatta.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go work in the Sydney office because it was thousands of people. The Parramatta office was 100 people. The North Sydney office was 100 people. The Penrith office was 100 people. I wanted to go to an office of better, that sort of size.
Why?
I just felt, having worked for 7 years in Dublin in an accounting firm with 100 people, I felt like you got access to the partners. You got access to the decision makers. So you got to see a lot more.
Yep.
Whereas I just felt, maybe naively and wrongly perhaps with hindsight, if I went into the big 3,000-4,000 person office, you're just a cog in a wheel.
Yep.
Anyway, we ended up in Parramatta. There's some very funny stories about that, which I won't bore you with. And I worked for Chris Jackman, was the head partner of Pricewaterhouse in Parramatta. Chris is Hugh Jackman, the actor's father.
Yeah, right.
But Chris, God bless, was the grumpiest old F you'd ever meet in your life, mate. And he was as hard as nails. But that transition from Ireland to Australia, we didn't know anybody here bar one person. The office was brilliant. I've got lifelong friends from my days with Pricewaterhouse and Parramatta. The thing that struck me, Greg, which was, I think it was week 6, that one friend lived in Canberra. She'd come over, she'd met an Australian guy in London. She'd just come across. So we decided to go down to Canberra to visit, which you do.
Yep.
And we went down, and on the Saturday we went to the Institute of Sport, which wasn't long built.
Yep.
And we went in for the tour. 2 hours in, my wife says, we're done. We're going. I says, we're so not done. I've so much more to see here. And being a sports person as I was and am, it dawned on me, and the light went on, as to why Australia did so well on the international circuit relative to its population.
Yep.
And this building, or these buildings and these facilities just demonstrated to me. I compare that to what I saw at Elite Sport in Ireland at the time, and it was chalk and cheese. And we were here. And we've really, to be honest with you, never, bar once, seriously thought about leaving.
How good a sportsman were you?
I did play for Ireland when I was young. Played goalkeeper for.
You're a goalkeeper,
soccer.
right?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, when I was the same height when I was 17 as I am now.
Must have a good leap.
Reasonable
Good spring.
Yeah, but no, thoroughly enjoyed it.
And you didn't consider going further forward? You know, UK's across the road over there.
I tried. I did try with the team. Yeah.
Who'd you try with?
I tried with Leeds.
How'd you go?
Leeds United. No, I didn't get selected. That was fine because that would have been a terrible, terrible, terrible outcome. I wouldn't have had the life I've had. Okay. But I'm a passionate Leeds United supporter to this day.
Right. Who was coaching those days?
Revy.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great teams.
Yeah, great teams. Yeah, and lots of Irish boys in the team as well. Yeah.
You're listening to No Limitations with special guest Pat O'Sullivan. In our next episode, I sit down with Robert Spurway, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer at GrainCorp Limited.
GrainCorp at its heart is a high-quality infrastructure business. We connect regional Australia and growers in particular with customers and consumers around the world. We do that through assets that store and move grain, including 7 deep-sea ports across the east coast of Australia. We have a processing division that adds value to oilseed in particular, producing edible oils, margarine, spreads, bakery application products. And then we have a range of related businesses, including in animal nutrition, that connects, again, back to the grower. So we're really connecting farmers and growers with customers around the world, and we do that by high-quality interconnected infrastructure.
Be sure to join us on our next episode. And now, back to the show. So you're in Parramatta. You've brought your wife.
Mm-hmm.
You're starting things. What was your take on Australia? What was your take? Yeah. No, it's a significant play. You've made the move. You didn't go to Bermuda.
Yeah.
You've set yourself up mentally to say, right, I'm going to learn as much as I can. That's why I've chosen this office.
Yeah.
As you said, you've got a pretty hard taskmaster above you.
Yeah.
What did you set out to achieve?
I have never planned my career.
Okay. Really?
Never. That's the truth. I never have. If I see a window open and I think it's the right one to leap through, I'm through it in a nanosecond.
All right. So your hand's up in a flash, is it?
Yeah. So I was very fortunate that some of the clients I had early on were quite interesting. So I was on the Barclays Bank audit. I was on the Arnott's Biscuits audit. They were the 2 major big ones. Tallman's Paints.
Oh, yeah.
So some really good clients. And what I saw early on that I hadn't seen in Dublin, just by virtue of the clients I was working on in Dublin were much smaller, yeah?
Yep.
Were bigger companies.
Yep.
And getting a glimpse, and it wasn't just a glimpse because I was junior burger, a glimpse of the CFOs of those organizations.
Yep.
And the roles they played, probably in my subconscious, was probably something, when I said I didn't plan my career, I probably always had at the back of my head,
That's where I'm going to be.
that looks really interesting. I wouldn't mind doing something like that.
And ultimately, it's a leadership role.
Correct. The leadership piece wasn't for me. I used to blush terribly when I was young. Even though I spent that time as a young person working in my dad's shop, I was always blushing. Somebody would I was easily embarrassed, yeah? So after about 6 months here, I can't remember who it was, it doesn't matter, but one of the managers at Pricewaterhouse said to me, did you ever think about doing Toastmasters?
You'd be a natural for the Blimey Stone, wouldn't you? Being an Irishman, geez.
Well, I wasn't at the time. And I'll never forget going to do Toastmasters the first evening, and I was asked to stand up and talk for 40 seconds about some God knows what topic. Honestly, I was petrified. But it was the best thing I did, because I met some really great people on that sort of course. We call it a course.
Yep.
And we had a bit of fun. And I learned a lot about presenting, public presenting myself. And that was a nice little sort of increase in thing. So I was always looking for opportunities just to do a little bit extra.
It's about the ability to engage and influence, isn't it? That's what you're building.
And just to be able to sit or stand and talk with a degree of feel comfortable, so
confidence.
a bit more confidence, yeah.
Is it natural now?
I think it is.
A lot of work to get there?
I never saw it as work. It was just an evolution, to be honest. There are still places where I get up to speak. So I'm heavily involved with a charity, and I get up every year at one of our events, and I'm always nervous as. Whatever it is, I don't know, but I do coach football as well, and I always say to the players, use the nerves to your benefit.
Yeah.
Don't let them affect you, but use the nerves to your benefit, and that's kind of what I do. But look, at the end of the day, I'm 60 years old. I feel reasonably comfortable in my skin.
Yep.
And I think people who know me well enough will say, if there's a topic I don't have anything to say on, then I don't feel like I have to say anything, and I don't say anything.
All right. For a person who watches and listens, you made the move from the profession to corporate. Was it a client, Pat, or how did it all come about?
Yeah, no. It was probably, it may be the same today, kind of, I got to the stage where I came out here, the role I came out here, I can't remember what the title was, it doesn't matter. I was fortunate enough that I demonstrated I was probably a too junior a role, so I got a couple of good promotions early, which was nice. And then I got to manager level. And then when you're a manager level, you kind of look up and say, well, what's next? It's partner.
Partner or not?
And I just never really felt right to me.
Yep.
But I was enjoying what I was doing. And I said I had great exposure to these great companies. And then I think a couple of mates left at that manager level. So I thought, I might just dip my toe in the market, which clearly back then was much harder than getting on, Seek and having a look at what was available. You had to actually make the effort and go and meet someone like you.
Yeah, that's right.
Somebody scary like you and say, hey, what do you think of my CV? Yeah, I ended up at a company called Burns Philp.
Great trading company.
Went in there as the head of financial accounting.
Well, that's got some history to it.
Great history, yeah. That office in Bridge Street.
Yep.
Went in, enjoyed, it was a real learning from the other side of the table, if you like, understanding. So I was responsible for the management accounts.
Yep.
And then there was a guy who was my peer who I'll refer to as Krusty. Krusty looked after the financial accounts. So Krusty sat in the office beside me, but Krusty's blinds were always closed. So I didn't know if Krusty was in there or not. And it didn't really matter to me much other than at half year and full year where he was relying on my information so he could get his job done. Yeah. Yep. And there was an older guy there who was probably 40. Now that I'm 60, he felt old at the time. And he became a bit of a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And after about 9 months, the group financial controller who I worked for, he went to the US to be the CFO of the Burns Philp operation in the US.
Yep.
So that job became vacant, and I looked at it and stared at it and thought, I'm going to have a new boss, and that's fine. And this guy who was kind of a mentor said to me after about 2 or 3 weeks, he said, why haven't you put your hat in the ring? And I said, I'm just brand new at this. I'm learning. Yeah, I'm really learning. He said, no. Anyway, cut a long story short, I ended up getting that role, which was nice, except for Krusty. And Krusty didn't want the role, but he clearly saw me as a whippersnipper who hadn't done his time, and therefore, he'd make life difficult for me. And he did. And it was a real learning again. So I had promised the CFO that I'd get him the draft annual report on this particular Friday so we could have the weekend to look at it before the board meeting the following week. Or sorry, the board papers went out the following week for a board meeting. And I was sitting in my office, and Krusty had promised me said document by midday. And this is now about 2 o'clock, and I'm due to deliver at 3 o'clock to the CFO. And I see him going past my office door and heading down the stairs. So I went out after him. And I don't know what I was doing, but I just said to him, hey, his name was Ray. Ray, where's the document? Where's the document? He says, I haven't finished it. I got to get home to the kids. I said, mate, I promised it. Like, it has to go. And he just looked at me and he walked off. So I thought, what do I do? What do I do? So I followed him down the stairs, and I got to the bottom. I said, look, when can you have it? Can you work on it tonight? I'm happy to come over and pick it up for me on Saturday. I'll drive over and pick it up, no problem with else. And he said to me, okay, if you come over tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, I'll get it for you. So then I went to the CFO and said, this is where it's at. I'll get it to you tomorrow. And that was all good. But again, just in terms of learning, in terms of managing people, being a bit younger, older people who've been there for 15 years in the company, just learning to manage difficult situations. We all learn from hard knocks, right?
Did you keep Krusty?
No, he moved on.
Yep.
Yeah, mutual agreement. He decided life was probably going to be easier somewhere else.
And well, there's a time and a place, right?
Correct.
Okay, so during that's the heyday Burns Philp then in those days?
Yeah, so I left 6 weeks before Graham Hart acquired Burns Philp.
Yeah, okay.
6 weeks. That was a blessing. And the reason I left was I went to a function at, coincidentally, Pricewaterhouse, and the guest speaker at the time was a guy called David Hearn, and David was the CEO of Goodman Fielder. And David, if you've ever seen or met David, I think is still the chairman of A2 Milk. He's an English guy. He went to school with Rowan Atkinson.
Yep.
And David was the funniest guy. And he's one of those people, and he walks in the room, everybody goes, he's in the room. Yeah. Anyway, over a few beverages after his presentation, we were just chatting, and he said to me, "Why don't you come work for me?"
Simple as that.
Simple as that. "Why don't you come work for me?" And I said, "Doing what?" And he said, "Oh, there's lots of roles in there. Accounting team." He said, "I know the group financial controller role's up for grabs at the moment." And he sort of whispered, he said, "Oh, the CFO's not,
Room for improvement.
Opportunities coming there." So I went home that night to my wife, Paula, and I came in. She said, "That was good. Yeah, really, really good." I said, "I think I'm going to quit." She said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I met this bloke, David Hearn." And I said, "Well, what's the job?" I said, "I don't know." So I quit. And I went and joined Goodman Fielder without a job description.
No job description.
No.
Shake of the hand almost.
Yeah, just backed my judgment with David. And I went to there as the group financial controller, and then the CFO didn't work out, so I became the acting CFO. And then I had a real lesson. Probably I got lucky, if I'm honest.
Yeah, but you make your own luck.
To a point. So I put my hat in the ring for the CFO role.
Yep.
And I missed out, and I was gutted. I was absolutely devastated. Couldn't work it out. And I knew David Hearn, the CEO, was an advocate of mine, so I just could not work out what was happening. But roll forward 3 months, David was fired. Oh, right. And the reason I didn't get the CFO role was I was seen as being too close to David. But fortunately, prior to David leaving, I said to him, I'm out of here now. I missed out, so I'll go elsewhere. And he said, no, don't do that. Don't do that. He said, I've got a deal for you. And I said, what's the deal? He said, you pick something you want to do, and then I'll ask you to go across to New Zealand for 2 years, because they were looking at transforming that business, and he was just putting a new CEO in place over there, and he wanted someone to go over that, the company knew as the CFO. So I'd met, again, by coincidence, a guy at one of the law firms who had just been to Harvard. And I sat and I talked to him about this advanced management program, and I was fascinated by it, fascinated. So I went back to David and I said, David, if you send me to Harvard for 3 months, then I'll go to New Zealand for 2 years. And I went home to my wife that evening and I said, I've got some good news and I've got some better news. One is I'm going to the US for 3 months on my own with 3 kids under 5 at the time.
Ooh.
And secondly, we're heading to New Zealand for 2 years. And she said, all right. And the good news and all that. So that's what I did.
How big was the relationships? You're starting to see and build relationships now. Big part?
Yeah. One thing I've never done is played politics. Never. It just does my head in. Just such a waste of energy and time. And
a lot of people do it.
And I watch people, and I would stay out of it. Yeah. So yes, building relationships.
Not easy
really
to avoid.
important.
Sometimes easy.
No, it's not easy to avoid. But I'd probably take it head on. Krusty was an example. I could easily have played the game, but I chose not to. I chose to take it on, and with hindsight, it was the right thing to do. Missing out on the CFO role at Goodman Fielder was a blessing, because I realised 3 years later I actually wasn't ready. I actually was not ready.
Yeah, okay.
I probably would have failed in some way, shape or form. Even if David had stayed, I would have failed probably.
All right.
So I was a better person for that role 3, 4, 5 years later on.
Cutting your teeth being divisional.
Yeah.
Yep.
Relationships, professionally, again, not by design, but by outcome. I have very few friends, other than from my Price Waterhouse days and a couple of other exceptions, that I'm friends with people I've worked with.
It's deliberate?
No. It's just, again, I don't deliberately go, Greg, I really like you, but we work together, I'm not going to be your friend. It's just whatever it is in me, I sort of keep work and I keep
very separate.
Pleasure separate.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do your couple of years in New Zealand. Your wife's still there with you, which is good news as well.
Yep. I didn't end up doing a couple of years in New Zealand.
What happened?
I got the phone call
from
that headhunter to come to Optus. That was only after 12 months.
It was only after 12 months?
Yeah. And as David Hearn had long left the building, the head of...
So actually, just on this, so tell us about Goodman Fielder at the time. Now, here's an iconic company in Australia at one stage there.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me...
It was tough business.
Very, very tough business. So I was in New Zealand, in fact, when the first supermarket approached a manufacturer to have their own private label.
Aha, here we go. Right.
So
you're in trouble.
And I go back to the disruption piece with my father with the shop and the supermarket, yeah?
Yep.
So I'll never forget, Ron Vella was my boss in New Zealand, lovely guy Ron. And Ron called me into his office and he said, Pat, I've just had a call from, I won't name the supermarket, from one of the big supermarkets in New Zealand, and they've asked us, will we run, I can't remember the language they use, but basically a private label.
Yep.
And if we don't do it, they'll go to Weston's, their competitors.
Yep.
They've already said they'll do it. And we mulled over that for a good week. And you can see the pros and cons. If we don't, well, Weston's going to do it anyway, so we may as well, blah, blah, blah. And that was the beginning of the whole private label. And that was a massive impact on the profitability of lots of manufacturers, including Goodman Fielder. So I always joke to people when I used to read the half-year results of Goodman Fielder, I think we closed down every mill 5 times You know, we were just constantly announcing closures of mills, rationalisation of bakeries.
Yeah.
Like it was a tough.
It was the death of 1,000 cuts, wasn't it?
It was, but it was I really enjoyed working there.
So how do they even keep it? So how do you keep a positive culture when that stuff's going? That's hard.
No, it is hard. The learning for me out of it is, and I always say to people, because I love people describing me, as to what I am and who I am and what my experience is. I spent more time in FMCG than I have in tech. And the whole idea of trying to manage a business that's got financial challenges in a weird kind of way, I find that quite exciting. I had the same experience at Nine, which we'll get to shortly. I think it's a bit you're on the edge.
You've been tested?
I think there's a North Star.
Yeah,
so it's really clear.
Was there a North Star or was it a survival star?
At Goodman Fielder, the North Star was how do we break even?
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, not break even. How do we not reduce our profits year on year? That was the kind of North Star for the couple of years when I was in New Zealand, yeah?
Okay.
So it wasn't about growing the profits, it was about trying to maintain the same profit level, yeah?
Oh, gosh.
And there's only a few levers you can pull. Whereas...
Did it require creative accounting?
Do you push a few restructuring costs below the line and all that? Of course you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody does it.
Yep.
But the smart analysts see through that. At the end of the day, as we all know, and I learned with my little shoebox back in John Woods, back in Dublin, cash is king. Doesn't matter what the profit and loss account says, because most people can't understand it anyway, but how much money did you put in the bank this year, Greg?
Yeah.
That's the true test, ultimately, of you can't fiddle other than illegally.
Yep.
The cash, yeah.
Okay.
So it was all about the cash, yeah. Mm-hmm. But that what ended up being, I think, 15 months in New Zealand was just a massive 15 months for me because of this private label, because of the changes we were seeing coming through the industry, the pressure the company was under, and then watching a head office, because I now wasn't in head office, watching the head office trying to drive more from us and more from us and more from us, and watching Ron, the CEO, managing the CEO of the group company to say, here's the art of the possible, and unless you've got some better idea, then this is what we're driving to. So great experience over there, great experience.
Phone call.
The phone call from the headhunter, like I say, I've told you that. Was it a hard decision? Myself and my wife always knew we wanted to come back to Australia. Yep. That was always kind of on our thing. Yep. This is only 15 months in, so it was way too early. We'd met some lovely people in Auckland, some really, really nice people. So certainly from a family perspective, it wasn't the right time. My son was 6, who's my eldest, so with 6, 4 and 2. We would have loved to stay another 18 months, 2 years. But given the opportunity that Optus was for me to become the CFO of what at the time was a scale-up company, that was just too good an opportunity to miss out on. So I made the call and came across.
Why do you reckon they chose you? Because on paper, you're absolutely 100% right. No technology pedigree, no background in telcos, no exposure to working with Singapore.
No. So
now I understand you got customer, you understand manufacturing, sure, but gee whiz.
So the Singaporeans knew to a degree that Optus had some financial challenges. They'd bought it, hadn't done a huge amount of diligence because they weren't allowed to, and were realising there were some black holes. So they knew they needed an accountant who could come in and really unpick and baseline what was actually the true performance of that business. So that definitely helped me. And David Hearn, I can't remember the relationship. He had a relationship with one of the directors of Singtel, I think. And they spoke to him.
Yep.
And the combination of those two things, I think, ultimately was the reason that I got the job.
So what was the state of Optus when you...
So when I joined Optus, I'll never forget...
So what year were we talking, Pat?
March 2002. So Chris Anderson is the CEO.
Yep.
Paul O'Sullivan, no relation, was the COO. Yeah. Paul is still the chair.
Still the chair.
And I came in as the CFO. And my first meeting was in Chris's office, round table. I'm very good at reading upside down. And he had this book in front of him, yeah, with some numbers on it. And we were just sitting there talking. And Chris was fascinating as a leader. So Chris said, Pat, let's just be really clear on how this organisation is going to work. So we've just been acquired by the Singaporeans. They're really, really nice people, which they were, really, really nice people. But they are the Telstra of Singapore.
That's right.
We are a scale-up company. I mean, Optus was just growing at that time, right? He said, we lost $400 million. $400 million we lost last year. And I'm looking at this bit of paper upside down because I could see 400 on the bit of paper and it was 420 something.
Go on.
And then for the current year budget, so I'm joining in March, they had a March year end. So for the next year, the 2003 year, it was zero. So I said to him, is that budget zero, Chris? He said, yeah, we're going to turn this thing from $400 million loss into a zero, break even.
In 1 year?
In 1 year. And he looked at Paul and he said, Paul already knows how we're going to do that, and you're going to help him. And he said, I'm going to do a few things, and it's not going to be a lot to do with that. He said, I'm going to manage Singapore. In other words, keep them out. And he said, I'm going to manage Canberra because we need some fair, level playing field with Telstra.
Yep.
And he said, I'm going to manage other external stakeholders. But you, Paul, and the other exec are going to manage this business.
That's the engine room.
And we made, I think from memory, we made $20-odd million that year.
So 460 up.
Yeah. It was just a
440 up.
Tremendous time to be there. Tremendous, some wonderful people who today have great roles.
So how did you do it?
How do we do it?
Yeah, come on. This is a nut and...
No, I mean, I was a small cog on that wheel to start with,
how
Greg.
did the team pull this off?
So the mobile division, we had a number of divisions. So from memory, you're testing me now. We had the mobile division. We had what we call the business division.
Yep.
Which
is
enterprise corporate.
Yep.
We had, it was called CMM, Consumer Multimedia, I think it was, which was basically internet to the home.
Okay. Yep.
And telephony to the home.
Yep.
Yeah. And then we had a wholesale business and a satellite business. Yeah. So each of them had a plan. The mobile business was the one where the greatest opportunity was because guess what? Everybody was looking for a mobile device.
Yep.
And there's some funny stories that Paul and I share around decisions that were made around rolling out infrastructure in that time.
Yeah, go on.
Because we sat in a meeting of acronyms, and the decision we were making, and the numbers don't really matter because they were bloody phone book numbers, but I think the decision we were making was either between $750 million investment in rolling out base stations around Australia, so towers, if you like, for for mobile, or double that at $1.5 billion. That was the debate. And the engineers were pushing for the 1.5, and the commercial people were saying, no, the 750 million is a smarter place to be. And the arguments were back and forth. And at the end of the day, how long is a piece of string? Hindsight's a wonderful thing. And after about an hour and a half of this, Paul sat there, and with his fingers, he went, look, let's go with the 750 because we know we can always double down quickly. But he said, I can't see people spending their whole life, and he's doing his thumbs, on their devices doing this the whole time. True story. The smartest telecommunications executive in the country. And Paul just said, at this stage, I can't see it. At the minute we saw it happening, bang, the 750 became $3 billion probably in terms of what we actually spent. But that was the state of play of mobility in the world at that time.
Yep.
So we just got on that bandwagon really, really quickly,
Yep.
Quite innovative in terms of the plans we put out there.
Yep.
The business that was losing the most money was the consumer multimedia, the home, the Optus, the old Optus Vision.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That was losing, was it?
Losing a huge amount of money.
Right. Okay.
I was going to use a technical term there, which I nearly came out, which I didn't. And the reason it was losing was all these contracts that they had signed.
Okay.
The enterprise piece was kind of break even.
Yep.
So we saw opportunity there because they were fed up at Telstra at the time, The satellite business, we were actually looking at launching some satellites that year, so there was an opportunity to make some decent coin there.
Okay.
And the wholesale business was kind of ticking by. So probably where Paul and I spent most of the time initially was working with a guy called Martin Dalgleish, who was the CEO of the CMM business, and Martin was new, was really figuring out, do we double down or do we kind of pull back?
Yep.
And again, vague memories of decisions around doing a bit of both, depending on what we were actually thinking about. So on the television side, definitely trying to pull ourselves away from that and extract ourselves away from those contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of rollout was to double down and actually say, no, let's roll out so as we've got a bigger share of homes in Australia. And it was just a combination of both, but definitely the mobility business was the one that gave us the biggest kicker. One of the biggest challenges that I had in my first few years at Optus.
And what size team were you overseeing at this stage? A couple hundred, obviously.
No, more than that. Yeah. I had billing. I had.
Well, this is a big leap from New Zealand.
No, it was absolutely a big leap from New Zealand. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And as I say, fortunately for me,
right. And it's the first number one gig
as a CFO. Well, right. Yeah, New Zealand was a CFO, but it was of a subsidiary. Yeah. And this is a subsidiary, obviously, of Singtel.
Yeah, but almost standalone in many regards, right?
Correct.
Almost.
Correct. And some of the stuff, back to what we've talked about already, they did a quarterly update to the market, and then we did a quarterly update to staff. And I was required to sit like we are here in a studio and do this. And then do town halls.
Yep.
And this is stuff that I just hadn't done a lot of. So I go back to my, the things I did at Price Waterhouse in terms of Toastmasters, getting that experience, that helped me in good stead.
You went back to that.
It sort of went back to me, right?
Yeah.
I needed lots of media training, all that stuff. It was all really important. So it wasn't just counting beans and figuring out, the balance sheet balance and was the cash coming in. It was a broader role in terms of now managing big teams of people, being part of the face of the company to many thousands of employees at Optus at a very exciting time. Like, it really was a really exciting. I was there 5 years. Just tremendous. The first 4 years were tremendously exciting because it was all about growth. But one of the biggest challenges I had was the Singaporeans, the city that I dealt with. People had said to me before I joined, the culture of working for an Asian company is very different. And nobody could really explain what that meant.
What, all about face, etc. Or
Well, face, but more so trust.
Yep.
And I always said to people, a lot of people in Optus in my whole time there, it wasn't that they weren't trusted. Sorry, it wasn't that they were distrusted or mistrusted, whatever the right word is. It's just that the Singaporeans hadn't got around to trusting them yet. So you had to find the place where you were trusted. Once you were trusted, your world opened up. So one of my first experiences with the CFO of Singtel, who went on to be the CEO, a lady, Tycoon, who was a lovely, lovely lady, an incredibly bright woman, was straight up I looked at the org chart and went, this is mad. There was like 15 reports to me, the CFO. I thought, this is just crazy. I'll spend my whole time doing one-on-ones. I won't actually do anything other than that. So I put to her after about 3 weeks a proposal to restructure. And this sent it to her, and she came back to me and says, no, just take your time. We'll pause. Okay, that's not a great response. I'd really like to get on with this. And then about a week later, I didn't follow up. I just, acknowledge kind of thing. And a week later, she sent me a note and said, I'm in Australia in 3 weeks' time. Let's sit down and have the chat. So I thought, okay, that's good. So I didn't do anything more other than brought the same bit of paper and put it in front of her when she turned up here. And she sat there and said, no. He said, just take your time. Just figure some stuff out. And at that point, I was into some black holes, which I was having to tell her about in terms of trying to really find out what the real underlying profitability of the company was. And she said, no, let's just hold off. So when she left on that trip, I was really frustrated. And I went to see Chris Anderson, my boss. And I think Paul might have been involved, or Paul's, as we called him, might have been involved. And I said, for God's sake, I just want to I'm not firing anybody. I just want to move some roles around because it's absorbing me a lot. And Chris smiled at me and he said, remember I told you that I'm going to do a few things, Pat? And one of those was managing Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
This is my job now. So I'll jump in here. And he went to Tycoon. And clearly I was trusted. So I'd already built trust. And she said to Chris, if you supported Chris, tell Pat to proceed.
Is that right?
And it's just a great example of how they operate. So they're fantastic operators. And I learned so much from the Singtel executive. So Lee Sin Yang was the CEO president. So he's the son of Lee Kuan Yew.
Yep.
One of the sons of Lee Kuan Yew.
Yep.
So we're talking about, the top of Singapore, yeah? And watching him and Tycoon, the CFO, operate, they used to fly to Malaysia or Indonesia or Thailand for lunch. You go, what? And they were all about building relationships. And the whole thing was about building long-term relationships. And that has held me in great stead with the companies I'm now involved with in terms of how we do M&A, which we can talk about later if you wish. But I found it fascinating. Fascinating. And what they were doing was building relationships. And they were sitting and having lunch and cups of tea and whatever else they were doing and just getting to know each other. So then eventually, sort of 3 years later, there might be a deal to be done. But they knew each other. Both parties knew each other. So it wasn't send the investment banker in and see if we can get a deal going here. It was actually, how do we build relationships, long-term relationships, and then are there business transactions to be done?
Why do you reckon you survived, Pat?
Survived what?
Well, this is a major growth play. You come from a different sector. You've gone into telcos. Very, very dynamic. Why did they keep you? What do you reckon you thought you really brought to the table? And it's, as a CFO, it's well and truly above your technical skills. That's someone else's job. What do you think stands you out?
Oh, look, I think at the end of the day, I live and die by the no surprises rule. And I found stuff, both financial and otherwise, that perhaps was easier not to call out. And I called it out. Because at the end of the day, my view is a problem shared is a problem halved. So in one division, I found this dark, dark hole of transactions that I just could not get my head around. And I couldn't figure out whether they were just inappropriate accounting. So back to your original creative accounting. Was it creative accounting or was it actually fraud? I could not figure it out. And we're talking serious amounts of money.
Okay. Serious
amounts of money. And one bit of me said, and Paul was great counsel. Paul O'Sullivan was great counsel. So I'd always raise it with Paul. And we talk about, are we better just keep digging the hole a bit bigger to find out a bit more? Or do we have enough information to say that, yes, you should now go and report to your masters? And I always took the latter view. That once I felt I had enough gut feel that there was a problem, I'd raise it, but I'd always come with a plan. that said, here's what it looks like a problem, but here's my plan to really get down and deep and dirty and figure out the right answer to that. So I was just constantly learning and learning and learning. And as I say, there was a great group of people in that executive team at Optus at the time. Vicky Brady was the CFO of the mobile division, for example.
Yeah.
People have gone on to great jobs that were in that era at Optus at the time.
Talk us through the marketing and the excitement of it. You're up against the big giant Telstra.
Mm-hmm.
What did it feel like to go in as the one taking him on?
It was fantastic because we had nothing to lose. So in every market in which Vodafone operated in the world at the time, I couldn't tell you if it's a fact today or not, they were the number 1 or number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And in Australia, they were number 3.
Yep.
So not only were we looking at Telstra above us, we knew Vodafone was also trying to get that number 2 slot. And as we all know in this country, you generally have two succeed in every industry, give or take.
Oligopoly.
Yeah, there's obviously the banks, there's more, but in the main, the oligopoly works, yeah.
Yep.
So we were always looking over the shoulder at what Voda were doing. And Voda, for example, were the first ones to introduce all-you-can-eat plans on mobiles, you remember. Yeah. That was back to the equivalent of the home brand back in the Goodman Fielder days.
Yeah, right, okay.
That was an equivalent moment of, oh my God.
We're in trouble.
And I was doubly concerned by it because one is, this is going to drive profitability down if we're not careful.
Yep.
But secondly, we have billing systems at Optus that I'll never forget. The head of billing, who, when the first day I joined, I had my first meeting with him, told me that everything was held together by sticky tape. Literally. He said that the platform built for billing mobiles in Optus at the time, I'm making the numbers up here, but roughly was built for a maximum of 250,000 customers. That's all it would basically be able to bill. And at the time, we'd over 1 million. So we were already on borrowed time. And now we were going to have to somehow capture all-you-can-eat plans and charge you $79 rather than charging you by the minute or by the whatever. Text. So I was stressing by the engineering that needed to happen behind me, as well as thinking about the profitability of the company. So that whole time was just so dynamic. But up against Telstra was great because at the end of the day, they had nowhere to go. They had us chomping away. They had Voda chomping away. And the arrogance of that organisation, like we were their biggest customer in our wholesale division, biggest customer, wouldn't take a meeting with us. Arrogance was just phenomenal. And that was great. It just made life easier for us. We just ploughed on through.
What type of people do you hire for that type of organisation then?
High energy. Well, certainly in the parts of the organisation that I had responsibility for, it was all about getting people in who really believed in the vision again. It was entrepreneurial. That's what we were doing. A lot of people say, oh, you're at Optus, it's kind of a mature business. It was so not a mature business. We were literally trying to build things to support what we were trying to sell out the front door. It reminded me a lot, and again, a lot of the learnings I had at Optus when I was fortunate enough to get involved with Afterpay,
yep,
which was on a far greater trajectory.
Yeah.
But at the time that I was there with Optus, the growth trajectory wasn't far off that.
No, exactly.
So trying to put structures, systems, processes in place
at 1 million miles an hour.
When there's a rocket ship flying.
Yeah, without putting the handbrake in as a CFO.
Completely. The easiest thing in the world is to say, no, we need 6 months to build a billing system.
Well, sorry, we haven't got it.
Guess what? We haven't got 6 months, which is exactly the Afterpay that I lived through for nearly 20 years after that.
Yeah.
Was exactly the same. And your job as the CFO or COO, broadly, whatever that title is about getting on board with the commercial side and then working with I'm going to call them engineers. I don't mean literally the engineers, but I mean the people who are going to design the systems and processes to actually deliver the support mechanism so that the customer gets the great experience that you're promising them.
It's also in keeping the integrity of the organisation.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't quite finish that story off before. When you went to those black holes,
and
you and Paul sat down, was it fraud?
No, it wasn't fraud. It was creative accounting and it was hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow.
Mm.
Why did we move on from Optus?
Sure.
What was the change?
So Chris left Optus, Chris Anderson, to go work for the Packers.
Mm.
And my secretary walked into my office and she said, "You've had a phone call." I said, "That's great, yeah. I'll get lots of those. So why is this one so special?" And June was the lady's name, June. She was a mature lady. And she said to me, with dead straight face, she was an English girl, she said, "Chris Anderson called and has left you a message." And I'd probably talked to Chris maybe 4 times, 5 times since he'd left. So we weren't mates or anything, but we'd kept in touch. I said, "That's great." I sort of put my head back down and she stood at my desk. And then she started, the smile came across her face. And I said, "June, what's going on? What's going on?" Exactly. What's so funny? And she said, do you know what day it is? She said, do you know what date it is? And I said, no, tell me, June. So she tells me the date. She says, yeah. Why is that special? She says, Chris left the building 1 year and 1 day ago. I said, yeah.
Oh, right.
And in his contract, I'm sure, it says that he can't poach.
She's sharp.
She was very sharp, mate. Very sharp. Anyway, cut a long story short,
She wasn't a disguised headhunter or something like that, was she?
She was spot on. She was spot on. And anyway, I went and met Chris, and the short story of a long conversation was Chris said, you need to come work for the Packers. So I did.
All right. Come on, tell us the stories. What did you walk into there and what were you charged to deliver over there? And why did you want to leave? Are you done your course? Time for a change?
So again, because I don't plan things.
Yep.
There's something in my biological clock. If you look at my career executively, I generally do 5 to 6 years.
Yep.
And what I say to people is, I think subconsciously there's a degree of cynicism probably comes into my psyche, going through the same cycle again.
Yep.
So I think that's the reason, but each time I've left there's been a reason. And the reason this time was this phone call, yeah. So I went and met in a very awkward environment, which was in a restaurant, with John Alexander, who was running PBL at the time, yeah? A listed company, yeah?
Yep.
And there was people closer than you are sitting to me right now having their lunch, and John's interviewing me. And as you can tell, neither as you or I have quiet voices, so it was a bit awkward, right? Anyway, we chatted for a couple of hours over lunch, and he basically offered me the role of the Chief Operating Officer at PBL.
Yep. Not CFO.
No, there was the CFO, Jeff Cleman, who was a wonderful man
Yep.
and still is a wonderful man. Jeff is the CFO, and they were creating this new COO role, yeah? But he was a bit light on detail. And what it reminded me a little bit of was the decision to join Goodman Fielder.
Yeah.
Will I go in here on a hunch? And I just felt I needed a little bit more. So John's driver took me back to North Sydney, and 2 hours later the phone rings and it's Tina, John's EA, on the phone. John wants to talk to you. Okay. Hey, John, have you made your mind up?
2 hours.
2 hours, yeah. I said, John, I'm going to need a bit longer than that. And if I'm not the right guy, then I'm not going to make a decision that quick, then I'm not the right guy. Anyway, roll forward, we met a few more times, got a job description, got comfortable with the role, said I'd take it on. So he said to me, fantastic. And there's other bits and pieces that are funny in that story, but I won't go into those. I said, yep, fantastic. He said, great. He said, can we just hold off for a couple of weeks because there's another executive we're recruiting at the same time, who turned out to be a guy called Ian Law, who ultimately became my boss. Ian, unfortunately, since passed. And we'd like to announce the two at the same time. I said, that's fine, no problem. So I said, I'm not saying anything here, and all good. So he said, no, that's fine. Anyway, about a week later, another phone call from Tina, and she said, Pat, have you got a CV? And I said, no. And she said, well, Mr. Packer would like to meet you, and we need a CV. And I said, okay, give me a couple of hours, I'll put a CV together. I put a CV together, send it over, and then I get a message to say, can you come and see Mr. Packer tonight? So I said, yeah. But dipped off to the bathroom, as you can imagine, quite shortly thereafter, thinking, da-da-da. So I arrived down at Park Street to meet Mr. Packer, and John meets me, John Alexander, and he says, Pat, Kerry doesn't know I've basically offered you the job and you've accepted it. So this is an interview. So don't let me down, please. So Kerry wanted to meet me and was part of the recruitment process as far as Kerry was concerned, but I'd already signed a bit of paper. So I said, yeah, that's fine, no problem. So the two of us wander up into Kerry's office, and this man who, obviously I'd seen on TV and seen on newsprint, I could barely see his neck behind the table. Strange, and he was puffing away on a cigarette. Anyway, I come in the room, and next minute he comes up, and he just literally rose up out of this thing, and this man who was 6 foot odd just stood up. And he wasn't overly well, you could see that straight away. He shook my hand, told me to sit down, so I sat down opposite him, and John sat to my left. And we just started chatting, just talking about who am I and where did I grow up, and basically questions you're asking me. Bit of a history lesson. Anyway, I could feel John twitching in the chair beside me. So we're there about an hour. So Kerry turns to him and he says, and I won't use the explicit word, but I'll give I'll give you the first letter. And he basically said, John, is there somewhere you effing need to be? You look a bit like you need to be somewhere. And John says, no, I'm fine for another half hour. And Kerry says, well, you can F off at any point you want, mate. We're fine. We can get on. We don't need you chaperoning us. We'll be okay. So we went back to the chat. Anyway, half an hour arrived and Kerry looked at John and says, well, fuck off. You're gone. So off goes John. Anyway, I could feel these eyes looking at me as John left the room. Like, please don't blow this. So we sat there for, I don't know, another 40 minutes chatting. And then out of nowhere, Kerry came up out of the chair again. And he was in front of me. His face was so close to me, but his elbows on the table. And he just had this tirade, just absolute vomit of swear words, which basically he was saying to me, Pat, if I offer you this role, do never steal from me, never do anything I don't know about or don't want you to do, yada, 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 yada. And there was not one thing in what he said that bothered me.
Yeah.
So when he'd finished, I just looked at him and said, Kerry, I've got no issue with any of that.
Yeah.
And he slid back down to the chair and we sat there for another couple of hours chatting. I had blisters on my thigh from the phone vibrating in my pocket.
Oh, that was John.
Which was John, who was obviously ringing his EA to say, has Pat come out yet?
Still in there.
Is he still in there? And that's how I joined PBL.
How'd you find Kerry?
Kerry,
Intimidating,
unfortunately...
or did you get to relax? Or
he was
a
bit of everything, mate, yeah. He was a real presence. It was the only conversation I had with the man. He actually had passed away because he passed away that Boxing Day.
Yeah.
And so I joined in February, so I never actually got to work with the man.
Okay.
No.
But still, you got a couple of hours one-on-one.
Oh, unbelievable, yeah. Yeah, I would say lovely on many levels.
Yep.
He knew his business. He knew what he wanted. You just feel this drive of a human being.
I was told once by another CFO who worked with him that he had the ability to take the complicated and just make it very simple in the sense of the questions that he was asking around business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of it like cash type mentality too.
Yeah. Look, because I didn't experience that. In the conversation, it was a great conversation. We had a really good conversation. I was talking to somebody who owned a business and understood his business. And he was really just, testing me, I guess, in terms of what did I bring to the table.
How did it finish up?
As far as he was concerned, he made the offer to me to accept the job. He didn't make the offer to me. John rang me when he eventually got me and he said, you passed. You're good to go.
All right. So what did you walk into?
Walked into another environment that was
in the world of media.
Very different. The world of media, no idea. Television. I had a very young secretary who had only been in the company, I think, a couple of months that she was assigned to me, which was nice. So she decided that she'd organise my diary for that first week because I wouldn't know who was who in the zoo. And the first appointment she had for me was with Sam Chisholm at Willoughby at 10 a.m.
And the household name, old Sam.
Yep. So I've driven out to Willoughby, went through the security, and the first thing that struck me was the names on the parking spots. I thought, okay, this is interesting. So everybody's name was on the parking spots. And then I was obviously in a visitor car park. I went in, and the short version of a long story is I was due to see Sam at 10 o'clock. I'm never late for any meeting. I arrived at 9:45. His EA sat me outside his office, and his office was a bit like this setup here where there was a couch outside and there was a glass window, and Sam was, 20 metres at his desk reading the newspaper. Sam eventually came out of his office at 11:15.
What?
Just left me sitting there. And Sam wasn't a very tall man. And he literally, I don't know how he appeared out because I was obviously having a snooze or something because I was going, this is just so rude.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to play the game. And he literally somehow got out of his office and was standing over me so I couldn't stand up. And I put my hand out to shake it and he barely shook it. And he literally said, who the F are you and what the F do you want bothering me and my time? Welcome to PBL and Channel 9. I just smiled and I said, Sam, I'm out here to meet you and learn everything I can about television from you. Sam was gone 3 weeks later and we moved on. That was my welcome to Nine Entertainment.
Where was the business at that point?
So if you remember back then, PBL effectively had two large parts to the organisation. There was what I call the media business, and the media business was made up of Channel 9, all the magazines and ACP, Ticketek, 9MSN, and car sales was a small investment. And then you had the gaming business. They were all making money.
They all were?
They were all making money. Okay. Yeah. The gaming business was just starting to build, Within, I'm going to say it was definitely within 9 months. It might have been within 6 months. James called John, myself, Jeff Clayman, the CFO, and Martin Dalglish, who I mentioned, who had come from Optus across to PBL, into a meeting. And
he was the other one who got tapped. That was the second one, right?
Yeah. He got tapped before me, in fact. Yeah. He had gone across before me.
Okay.
Yeah. James said, look, I've made a decision that I'm going to sell off some of the media business to private equity, and I want to run a process, and the process is very simple. And the process is I'll name the price, I'll provide the SPA, the sale agreement.
Yep.
We'll allow so many private equity into the process, and first past the post wins.
Okay.
That's basically what he described to us, and that was the process that I ran. And Eddie McGuire was the chief executive of 9 at the time, which of itself was quite interesting. And we ended up with 2 private equity, so CVC and one other, which I won't name. We're both at the line at the same time, at the finish line. And James came to Ian Law, who I mentioned was the other person who was recruited when I was, and me, and he said, Ian, I'd like you to be the CEO of the business, and Pat, I'd like you to be the COO of the business. But if you either of you don't want to do that, I knew Ian was a media guy. He was always going to do it. He said, if you don't want to do that, Pat, there's a job for you still within PBL, so don't feel like you need to go across. And I, again, made a decision that I'd go across. I liked Ian. I liked the businesses. I struggled a bit with the gaming business, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
In terms of where it sat with me from a values perspective.
Yep.
So it wasn't a hard decision. And I said I'd go across. And he said, well, on that basis, you choose who your owner is, me plus which private equity. So he was happy with CVC or the other, and we chose CVC. And then James sold, from memory, 25% of the business to CVC at that time. At the time, the magazine business was making best part of $300 million, it was $270 million of EBITDA.
Yeah, right.
The television business was in a bit of a slump, was still making probably $100 million. So it was third at the time, I think. 10 was number 1, 7 was 2, 9 was 3.
10 was 1.
Yep.
Gosh.
Yeah, 10 was 1. 10 was 1 for a long time. Yeah, 10 kicked a massive own goal. Fascinating.
Yeah.
And, yeah, bought in. Anyway, a thing called the internet had turned up.
Yeah.
And somebody will write the book at some point, because most people, if you recall, CVC lost all their money, and Goldman Sachs lost $1 billion in mezzanine on the deal. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
A bill?
Yep, of mezzanine. And within 18 months of that first so James sold 25 and then he sold another 25%, yeah? And then sold the rest of them. Within 18 months of that.
Oh, God, but how does Goldman's and CVC get it so wrong? Where was their DD?
No, they did their DD. And that's why I say to people, the thing that turned up was a thing called the internet.
Just changed everything.
It changed the magazine business.
Gone.
So we had the most profitable magazine business in the world because we had 2 income streams. People were paying for the copy on the street.
Yep.
Paying you $5, whatever you're paying. And we had advertising. There was no other global player in the world who had that. In the UK, the circulation money was gone pretty much. You were paying 5p for your magazine.
Yep.
So you only had the ad money. But in Australia, we had both revenue streams.
Yeah, right.
And that 270 turned up as 30 5 years later. Went from 270 million profit to about 30 in a very short period of time. Channel 9 makes as much money today, if not more, than it did back then. Whereas most people would say that CVC lost its money because they bought into a television network. So not the truth. All the money was lost to the magazine business, and nobody could have seen it coming. James didn't. James Packer will tell you he did not see it coming. He did not sell because of the magazine business. He sold because of the television business.
You enjoy working in a private equity?
It was fascinating. It was interesting.
What'd you learn?
What did I learn? I learned, well, in that environment, because again, I had to share bad news. An awful lot of bad news early on. It was about just backing yourself that you weren't sharing bad news for the sake of it, but being honest, open, no surprises was the best way to manage the business. And it took CVC, completely understandably, quite a while to get their head around the fact they'd bought a lemon. And once they did, then there was this common objective for survival. How do we survive this thing without actually just blowing the whole thing up? So that's what we did. I spent 5-6 years basically helping the business survive.
Why'd you stay so long?
I loved it. Really enjoyed it. I loved the environment. Worked with some great people. Worked with some ridiculously stupid egos, in the talent sense.
Yep. What'd you love about it?
Probably figuring out how to make this thing work. And the portfolio of assets, at a simplistic level, we had many conversations that says we need to take another 20% of cost out. That would be the conversation around the board table with CVC. Yeah, take 20% of the cost out.
That's the easy thing to do too, right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
And the thing that David Gingell and I, who was the CEO, who I got on extremely well with, and Ian before that, did a lot of was saying, we need to think about each asset differently. So we could have destroyed car sales back then because we owned 50% of car sales because James had a business called CarPoint that was merged with car sales, the business that Greg Roebuck and Walter Schotto founded. Yep. They were merged together and Nine had a 50% stake in that, yeah? So when this idea of about a 20% cost reduction would come, CVC would just say, across the board. And we'd push back and say, no. We have to invest in car sales. We have to invest in Ticketek. We have to invest in Line MSN. We'll do significant cuts in the magazine business and we'll do some cuts in the television business. And they were difficult conversations. they were difficult conversations to get agreement on that. Because again, the simple thing was no, all in, one in, all in. So they would, again, I enjoy that stuff. That's like Packer said to you, being involved with growth business is great, but actually managing portfolios of different phases and stages of life businesses is equally as interesting and challenging.
So what's the art of business then?
What's the art of business?
Yeah. When do you get in and when do you get out?
As an investor, you mean?
Yeah.
Look,
or as an owner, or as a...
Yeah. If I take car sales, which we now call Car Group,
yep,
that I'll talk about in a second. For CVC, that was the jewel on the crown. Ticketek wasn't far behind at the time, yeah. And they spent a lot of time valuing getting out of it. And then car sales listed, and the reason it listed was because Greg and Wall were under huge pressure from shareholders that there was this grey market that people were getting ripped off in. So because there was no tradable exchange for the stock, because it's private, people were buying privately, and they knew that people were getting ripped off.
Yeah, right.
The buyers were getting it way cheaper than what it actually could ultimately be worth.
Okay.
So they chose to list, which we and CVC were supportive of. They listed, so now there was a market price. So CVC knew the market value of the asset. They, me, we, they, everybody ran these spreadsheets going, what's the art of the possible in terms of what could the value of car sales be? And back then it was worth $4 or something was the share price, yeah? And just trying to get your head around a growth business, go back to my Optus days, of what the art of the possible was. I just was able to, and David and Ian Law were great at this too, saying, no, we've got to believe in these entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, this could double in size. Is there a world where it could triple in size? The size of the Australian market is huge. And we always looked at Seek because they started around the same time. There's lots of similarities. And then Seek started to look at some international stuff with, could car sales do some of that? But ultimately, CVC made a call on selling all of their stake in car sales.
Yeah.
I was on the board of car sales as a listed company because I'd been asked, regardless of my 9 ownership, to be on there.
Yep.
And they sold. That business is now, it's on its way to be $15 billion market cap. So, what's the art of business? It depends what business you're in. If I look at the magazine business, it was just falling knives. At the end of the day, could anybody have done anything different?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I asked myself that question a lot of postmortems. There were moments on that journey where sometimes people say it's what you stop doing. So it's what you stop happening as opposed to what you actually start can sometimes be as valuable. And an example of that was we had one person in the organization who was hell-bent on building a printing press because we outsourced all our printing.
Whilst the thing was crashing?
No. This is back in the good days when I joined. Yeah. When the thing was 270, 280, 290, it was growing.
Yep.
And it was so predictable. Like the growth was just an annuity stream is what it looked like, yeah? Mm-hmm. And it was for many, many, many years, yeah? And John Alexander should take a lot of credit for that because John ultimately is the one who started that real big business, yeah?
Yep.
This gentleman had been involved with Western Australian newspapers and they built their own printing press and had made a fortune as opposed to paying third-party providers. So he was hell-bent on building it and he had convinced CVC that we should spend the many hundreds of millions of dollars on this plant. And I just could not get my head around it. And I could not convince Ian Law, who was also the CEO of Western Australian newspapers, so he was involved with the printing press, so he knew it was gold. Just couldn't convince him that this just was not. There was just, the internet was there. This thing was starting to slowly unravel. So in the end, I went to the chair of CVC.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And I just said to him, I'm just giving you my honest professional view. I'm just telling you because I feel it's the right thing to do. I just don't think this is the right thing to do. And there were people in the organization who were pushing me through that door because they could see it as well. You've got to get in there. Somebody's got to stop this thing happening. And it was a good example of, and I say this to a lot of people, sometimes what you don't do, for good reason, put up arguments not to do, can be as valuable as the things that you argue to do. And that was a classic example of that. So you say, what's good business? It depends on what you're talking.
Yeah, and then the other side, I guess, to that, too, you've been exposed to, and we'll come to the second, some unbelievable growth plays. Do these people just think bigger than everybody else, Pat? When you hear some of the big entrepreneurs say, just think big, go big. Is that true, Pat?
The ones I've worked with, and I'm very fortunate, I mean, some of the people I've worked with who are entrepreneurial have just been amazing. They're just wired differently. They have this vision, and they don't spend a lot of time thinking about the how. They spend a lot of time thinking about that vision they can see. So if I give you two examples. So if I look at, say, Greg Roebuck at car sales, yeah?
Yep.
Greg had this vision for that business that started out as a listing site, and then it turned into a car classified business. And Greg always had the view strongly that if you own the consumer, the business will be successful. And he never felt that anybody else could take it away in the same way that car sales took it away from the Fairfaxes and the News Corps. Yeah, from the physical newspapers. If the consumer was happy and you were delivering a quality product to the consumer. And at the end of the day, incredibly respectful of the car dealers, but equally wanted the story for the car dealers that says, we will sell your car because we have the consumer. So that was his but that was his North Star. Win the consumer, we will win the market. And the car dealers, frankly, won't have a choice because this is the place where you're going to sell vehicles. And that's still a truism to today, yeah? And then if I look at the Afterpay story, and again, I got involved. It wasn't a very long story under the ownership of Australian ownership till it became part of Block. But over that 5-year period, I was involved for, I think, two and a half odd years, yeah? So Anthony Eisen and Nick Molnar, you couldn't find two more opposite people. 50 years old, 28 years old, completely different backgrounds, yada, yada, yada. The way they worked together was just unbelievable. They literally were like a hand and a glove. Anthony knew what he was strong at, Nick knew what he was strong at, and they didn't argue over what, they let each other be strong at what they were strong at, and they spent an awful lot of time together with that vision for that business. And the vision for the business was, at the end of the day, they were creating something new, basically a competitor to a credit card. And you look today at it and you go, wow, it's got $50 billion of transaction value going through it globally today. So these people are wired differently. So like I say, they don't think about so much about the steps to get from A to B to C like my brain thinks. They start with, this is the vision, this is the product, this is why the consumers will like it, and how do we make it better for the consumers? And they all have a bit of luck along the way. Did Nick and Nat know what they were building when they started? No, they didn't. At the end of the day, what they probably didn't, I think they would agree with this, what they didn't probably realise was the fact that a consumer would go to Afterpay to buy a blouse as opposed to going to the retail store and then using Afterpay as the mechanism to which to purchase.
Yeah, right.
So that double reason to be with Afterpay was part the reason for its absolutely rocket success. Whereas if it had just been a way of paying, it probably wouldn't have grown as quickly. But the fact that consumers were looking at Afterpay for their product meant that retailers had to be on Afterpay. Otherwise, Mary, Joe and John weren't going to buy the product.
It's almost like selling the magazines and selling the advertising.
Correct. Exactly right. So my experience with entrepreneurs, and I put James Packer in the category of an entrepreneur, by the way. My experience with entrepreneurs is they have the vision and they see something big in front of them, and then they get people behind them who will come help build the steps to get them there.
Why'd you go into boards as a professional career so early?
Great question. So I lost a young nephew to cancer in Dublin when I was 48, who I was very close to. I said to my wife, life's too short. My old man died when he was in his early 60s. I don't have a great history of genetics in my family. And I said, we live a fairly simple life. We can survive without me working full time. And if we can't, I'll go back to work at some point. But I just think it's something I should go and do, pursue my passion. My passion is coaching football. So I stepped away from executive life, and David Gingell and CBC were great about that. They understood the situation at the time, so there was a good transition away. Was it a quick decision? Yeah, I made it within weeks of Owen dying. Absolutely, yeah. And I couldn't have made a better decision with hindsight if I look back. That was 2012, June 2012. And how old were you, Pat? 48. Yeah, I mean, young. Yep. I was on the board of car sales. Yep. So you got a taste for it? So, and I was still on that board. Yep. So that was there. And I'm going to be frank with you. I sat back because I started to get some calls from, again, people that do what you do. Yep. And I thought to myself, I said, do I really want to do this? Because I hadn't had great experiences with the non-executive directors I had worked with. And I would describe the majority of them as they used to mark my homework or gotcha directors. Pat, page 1 says this, page 4 says something slightly different. Gotcha. Whoopie-doo. What value is that in a conversation? So the thing that dawned on me at the time, Greg, and others will have to judge whether this is true or not, is what C-suite executives do, particularly CEOs, CFOs, is very lonely. I don't think there's many CEOs can have an open, fully open, 100% open conversation with anybody in their organisation, because they're always looking over the shoulder at who wants their job. There's always a nervousness, subconscious nervousness, yeah? So it dawned on me at the end of the day that there was a role for someone to play whereby they could be there as a sounding board. And I'm far from the smartest bloke in the room. I'm far from the most connected bloke in the room. Many more have had lots and broader experience than I've had. But what I've found over the 12 odd years of being a director now and now chairing 3 listed companies is just being able to have a conversation about, you wake up this morning and you know it's time for Martha to leave, and Martha's one of your direct reports. Who can I talk to just to make sure I'm not off the bunker, off the ranch here, yeah? So they'll ring me up. We'll chat. I'll give my perspective. And my rule of thumb with all of these executives that I work with are, if I say go left and then they come to the board 180 degrees the opposite, I'll probably ask 1 or 2 more questions, but ultimately the CEO and the management team are running that business. If that doesn't go well, it'll have its own set of consequences in time, but I'm there as a support to the C-suite executives. So I'm very informal, incredibly informal. I speak to the CEOs, most of the CEOs at least once, if not 2, 3 times a week, depending what's on. If there's something on, like an M&A deal or we've just been cyber attacked or whatever, then it's full on.
Yep.
But in terms of who runs the business is run by the chief executive officer and his management team. I describe myself as Bob, back office boy. So even though I'm the chair of the company, I always listen and watch and observe other chairs, how they operate. And there are some who love to be front and center, which is so not me. And there are some who are Bob, and they're there to support. And I always reflect on Alan Joyce, who's a friend. Alan telling me when he grounded the planes that his chair at the time
Lee Clifford. Yeah.
was there, always supporting him, and always was available if Alan needed him to step forward. And Alan didn't at the time need him to step forward, but he had the confidence to know that his chair was there to support him. And I love asking people, and you got it straight away, who was the chair of Qantas when Alan grounded the planes? Most people don't know.
Yeah.
So that's my style, Greg. So long-winded answer to your question, I made a decision that if I could find places where that sort of arrangement whereby I was there as a facilitator, as a mentor, as a sounding board, as a connector, and the executives were comfortable with that, then that's a place I'd play. And that's why probably I've ended up with a lot of boards that are entrepreneurial founded and helped with the transition of those entrepreneurs out of the business to professional CEOs.
So being Bob the chairman then, what type of people do you bring on board?
Like-minded people, hopefully. So the board I've been on longest is Car Group, and arguably some would say too long. I've been on there 16 or 17 years.
And now chair.
And now chair, yeah.
Yeah.
Cameron, who's the CEO, I recruited with Greg 15 or 16 years ago, which is a wonderful story of itself in terms of Cameron's development and growth. And I know you've spoken to Cameron, so you've met him. I want directors on a board who are available to take the phone call, who read their papers, and who don't mark their homework, and who come with insights to the meetings. So what I mean by that is I want the C-suite executives looking at those directors going, I actually get some value out of this conversation. And not just in the boardroom, but actually outside the boardroom. So Cameron is, honestly, in terms of a director contacting an executive, Cameron doesn't want to know because he knows we're not going to go rogue and the executive's not going to go rogue. And the real test for me is the executive hold the board accountable at Car Group. So if somebody does steer a little bit towards the gotcha or the marking the homework, it comes back to me really quickly from the executive to say, not sure that's our culture. And that's brilliant. So for me, that is, to me, a modern board. People talk a lot about time spent on governance and yada, 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 yada.
Yeah, so where's that all at?
It's really important. For me...
Too much?
There's a huge amount of governance, and that's fine. The rules are the rules, so we comply with the rules.
Yep.
But most certainly what we try to do at the companies I'm involved with is use the board subcommittees to do a lot of the heavy lifting. Now, clearly, if you're in a regulated environment, so when I was on Afterpay, which is regulated, we use the subcommittees to do a lot of the heavy lifting on that, not at the main board. So really using the main board time together to really focus on the key operational issues at the time, and more importantly, the next 3 years. What are the things we're doing today for the next 3 years? And are we comfortable as the board that there's enough of those things happening and that they're on track? That's the board that I think is the best type of board. And we can do both. So when I'm out recruiting, looking for new directors, I don't need somebody who's got ASX experience. That's the easiest thing to teach somebody.
What do you look for then?
So depending on what you're looking for. So at the moment, say with TechnologyOne.
Yeah, okay, so are you a classic? Okay, here's a question for you. You're looking for new directors.
Uh-huh.
Is that based on the skills matrix? There's a gap here, I need that. Or am I looking for someone who's not going to run down the fire escape and is bringing all-round experience?
So in general, it's a combination of skill set and it's a combination of fit. So if I use TechnologyOne as an example, again, founder.
Right, so which three, for the audience.
Yeah.
Chair of
I chair Car Group, which was known as a brand as car sales.
Yep.
Is the reason it's called Car Group now is because we're in 5 different countries, different brand names in each country. So we thought we'd have a corporate brand, and car sales is our operational brand here in Australia still. Yeah. So Car Group, TechnologyOne, which is an ERP vendor, market cap about 5 billion, and a company called SiteMinder, which plays in the channel management space in hotels, which again is a listed company listed about 2.5 years ago here in Australia. If I look at TechnologyOne, founded by a guy called Adrian DeMarco 30-odd years ago, absolutely amazing business, competed with the Oracles and the SAPs and incredibly successfully. And I've never seen a company with better systems and processes and rigor. It is, in a positive way, Germanic in how things are done. It's fantastic, yeah? I joined, I won't bore you with that detail. Ed Chung is the CEO. Ed has been with the company for many, many years, has worked in every department in that company. He was the CFO for a while, but has worked in every single department. He was the CEO and Adrian was the executive chair when I joined as the lead independent director. And Adrian stepped off that board sooner than most of us thought because he just felt it was his time. The board has been there for a long time, some of them good people. Some of them were original investors in the business. So what I'm now working with Ed on is in terms of him understanding, because Adrian's view of a board was everything goes through the chair. And that was his style, and it worked beautifully for him. My style is not that. My style is bringing those people I described to you earlier and how do we add value, real value, to the C-suite such that they get something out of the conversation, not just getting their homework marked.
It's a real team dynamic, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. And there's a line. At the end of the day, I think everybody at Car Group would say there's no doubt as to where a director sits versus an executive. There's no director who wants to get doing the executive job. They don't. So as we think about the renewal of the TechnologyOne board, I'm looking with the board at the skill sets.
Yep.
So Adrian was the product guy. He was the visionary for the product. So we lose him as the executive chair. At an executive level, we had to backfill for him. And at a board level, we're looking to backfill for him. So finding somebody who's got good software SaaS experience, really important. But then it comes to fit. Will they fit the mold of this board that I think Ed will benefit most from in terms of having people that he will pick the phone up and say, I'm thinking about launching TechnologyOne in the US. Can you help me with that conversation?
Yeah, right.
So it's both a combination of skill set in that particular moment and fit in terms of the desire and ability to, not a phrase I love, but lean in and actually genuinely provide some honest assistance.
And coming from an ex-CFO.
And coming from an ex-CFO, please do not talk to my people. Yep.
The growth trajectory of all of those is pretty exciting, isn't it?
Yeah. No. I'm very, very fortunate. And as I always say to people, it's not me that's the common denominator there. It's actually the founders that created those businesses. And now it's in all three, they were all founder-led. And in recent times, so Cameron's been the CEO probably for 6 odd years now.
Yeah.
Ed's been CEO for just over a year. And Sankar at SiteMinder has been CEO probably for 4 years. Yeah. So relatively recently, is they've been able to pick up the legacy that the founders created and accelerated them. Yep. And that's a wonderful thing to be part of. And I think just my experience being around growth companies, but equally been around companies that weren't so growth, I think adds some value. And the word I use most around that board table is hubris.
Hubris.
So please do not believe in your own BS because that will be the death of us all. So it's really just trying to keep us collectively grounded because in the same way that we stole at Car Group the classifieds from Fairfax and News, as I said earlier, others are looking at the profitability of that business. TechnologyOne, people are looking at the profitability of that business and saying, how do we get a bit of that? And the same with SiteMinder. So just at the end of the day, enjoy yourself, be ambitious, be proud of what you do, but do not allow hubris to sneak in.
A number of those companies are going offshore or are offshore.
All three are.
Historically, been a bit of graveyard for a number of Australian companies.
Yep.
Why have they been successful?
So at Car Group, it took us a long time, and I don't necessarily say we have the final answer today, yeah? We worked out that our IP is actually our people. It's not our technology. So at its simplest level, we have what's called a blind lead model. So if you go onto car sales right now here and look at a vehicle, you can't tell. You can tell within a geographic distance where it is, but you can't tell who the dealer that has it is or who the consumer is that has it.
Oh, that's right.
So you're blind.
Yeah.
Yeah? We serve the lead to the dealer.
Yep.
And the dealer contacts you or doesn't. Once we serve the lead to the dealer pays car sales.
Done.
Clip
the ticket.
Yep. So that model is not one that's used in classifieds around the world a lot. And people say, well, that's easy. We'll just do that. We're rolling that out in our Chilean business at the moment, and the head of our Chilean business is rather anxious because she's seeing what happens, which is the dealers go, no, and they step off the platform. And fortunately, touch wood, what we've seen in other markets happen is they'll realise they don't get any leads because we have the consumer. At the end of the day, the consumer trusts our brand.
The consumer, that's right.
Well, come back. It comes back to that point, yeah. So in terms of Car Group, identifying that it's the people who've got the knowledge.
But how do you get the consumer when you go into these new countries?
No, we're not going in. We buy. So in each country we've bought, which comes to our M&A strategy, yeah?
Okay, so what's
so
that?
If you go to, so in each, so the markets we're in, so Chile, we bought an existing business in that marketplace.
Sophisticated, good, room for improvement?
Okay. Ripe for improvement. So by putting our systems, technology, process, that was ripe for improvement. It's the smallest of our markets. I'm not doing these in order, but I'll just do them in the order I'm thinking of them.
Yep.
Brazil, we bought in as a joint venture partner with Santander Bank as a minority shareholder, yeah?
Okay.
And we had more arguments around the Car Group board table about whether that was the right strategy, both when we did it and subsequent, because we'd all go, well, God, we're providing all of this synergy benefit, but we only get 49% of it. Or, sorry, we only own 30%. We're only getting 30% of it, yeah? Right. When the opportunity came to acquire...
Big market.
The opportunity came to acquire, because Santander came to us after nearly a decade, we all asked ourselves the question, do we want to own 100% of this business? And to a person, we said, no, we don't. Because we realized over that journey that Santander brings huge, huge benefit to that business. Because they're a big bank and they provide finance leads into the car classified business. So we're in the happy place where we've got a wonderful partner in Santander. We own 70% of that business now. And we've got a leader in that business who's an incredible entrepreneur growing that business. So our strategy to be a minority shareholder to start with, and then wait and be patient, get to know, back to my Singtel learnings of flying for lunch, build the relationships.
Yeah, okay, yep.
Korea, exact same story. We were, I'm getting some of this wrong, but 49% stakeholder with the government effectively. Never thought we'd get the opportunity to control it. Out of the blue, do you want to buy the rest? Brilliant. We've been in there for a long period of time as well. So we knew the asset, we knew the people, and we knew the people running the business. And then in the US, where we'd never gone, Wal Pashotto, the co-founder, is American. And Wal would always tell us rightly, and still tells us today, he's still on the board, different market, 52 states, different states, all that stuff, all that graveyard stuff, yeah? But again, Cameron and the team had built, as they do, built up relationships globally with all the classified players, not just in auto, in cars, in all different verticals, with the PEs, with the venture capitalists, and we convinced a venture capital firm who wanted to sell, they owned it all, wanted to sell 100% of it, not to sell 100% of it. We convinced them over a long period of time to allow us to come in as a minority shareholder, which was in the middle of COVID, by the way, which they agreed to, and we had a call option on the other 51%. So it allowed us to go in, get to know the people, understand the business, and we made that call within a year. Because the minute we met the people face-to-face, which we couldn't do during COVID, we knew they were a cultural fit with the organisation, and bingo, we've acquired it. So that's been our M&A strategy. But as I say, it's not one that we woke up one day and said, we'll buy minority stakes and then get control. We've evolved into that. And as I'm telling you quite openly, we've had lots of robust discussions around whether or not it is or was the right thing. So that's worked really well. TechnologyOne is in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. And I think Adrian, the founder, would tell you that we hadn't done a great job in the UK. We couldn't figure out why. And at the end of the day, it came back to people. Because of what I described to you earlier around those systems, processes, the Germanic way they run that business, which is wonderful, we were bringing people into the UK from SAP and Oracle who were great people, but had no idea what the TechnologyOne culture, systems, processes were. Well, guess what? We've moved a number of Australians across there now who are long TechnologyOne, who understand the culture, who understand our systems and processes, and now the business is building beautifully. So each one's got its own nuance. And technology companies at the end of the day is not all about the technology. It's actually about the people in a lot of cases.
Big lessons in M&A. You spend a lot of time investigating and understanding the relationships and the people, do you, and the culture, do you?
Absolutely. The cultural fit for those businesses that I operate in is critical because we're not buying the businesses, we're buying the people. We want the people. We know we've got the IP. We know how to do classifieds well. But if we don't have the people at the top of those businesses who can run them and who are culturally aligned, it's just not going to work. We had a strategy session last week where all the global heads were in town, and we as a board just sat there and looked at them and went, wow, it's just amazing how people from literally all parts of the globe are there, and yet they all feel the same type of people.
Hey, Pat, just out of interest, how many board meetings do you do? Now, there's arguments. The US do, 4?
Yeah.
Maybe over a couple of days, a little bit more. UK, 6 to 8. Australia seems to be 10 to 12. Because it seems to be excessive in some cases here.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in your views on that.
Yeah.
Because you demand a lot from your execs, putting the papers together.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and look, some NEDs can't turn up as a result of their diary, so therefore they're not going to accept the opportunity. So are we too over the top? Because we're governance. We're very compliant.
It depends on the industry you're in. I mean, if you're, as I said earlier, if you're in a regulated business, there's a lot of stuff, right? Yeah. And at the end of the day, there's no shortcut. In the boards I'm involved with, so Car Group, we would have, I think we got 9 board meetings a year and a strategy couple of days. And then you got your committee meetings as well. The board meetings run for 4 to 5 hours. So they're not all-day affairs or anything else. We do spend a lot of time with the exec, not just the global leadership team, but with the exec below that as well.
I do.
Yeah, that's part of our thing. And we do that without the exec and the CEO present. I mean, that's about us getting to know the business, getting to know the people. So when we see an org chart and Cam's telling us that he's going to promote Martha into this role, we know who Martha is.
Yep.
And equally, we get a sense is the culture really what we're being told it is, yeah? TechnologyOne, being a software company, has got longer cycles. So we meet 6 times a year, 4 times face-to-face and twice over Zoom. And then we've got our committee meetings as well. And then SiteMinder would run to the same cadence as Car Group, probably 9 times 4-hour meetings. So I think we're at the softer end or the lighter end of touch.
Yep.
But there's a fair bit of interaction in between, not just with me, with the respective C-suite executives, but some of the head of people and culture will spend quite a bit of time with the head of people and culture in the companies.
Yep.
The head of audit will spend time with the CFO, obviously, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah. So, long-winded answer to your question. It's not something that I just turn up and say, we'll have 10 meetings, because that sounds like a good idea. It's trying to think through, how do you keep in touch with the business, but don't burden the business with the requirement for paperwork?
Okay. And you're talking long-term, but all over here is the balance for chairs and CEOs to deal with funds, key stakeholders, the market on short-term requirements or numbers.
Again, it depends on the company you're involved with, mate.
It does,
yeah.
But there is a lot of pressure to get results.
Oh, I mean, we all know the share market is finely balanced in terms of surprises. So you miss a number by a couple of percent, and you get whacked.
Yep.
And you overachieve, and you get an artificial uplift. That is the environment in which we're operating. Again, I can only say for the companies I'm involved with, the share price is an outcome. At the end of the day, if we deliver good numbers, keep the market informed so they're not surprised, and have a long-term plan that's believable to us, then the market should believe it. The market will value you accordingly.
What about PE? You're not on too many boards in PE?
I'm not on any. Yeah.
You going to do it?
I've talked to them about stuff and advisory roles. Nothing has landed yet, but yeah, I mean, that's definitely of interest to me.
No, the only reason I asked the question, do you think the ASX model or the listed model works best?
No.
What could be improved?
I don't think any listed environment works well. The fact you're doing quarterly in the case of SiteMinder, because it's still burning cash, reporting is just a massive, massive impediment on management focusing on the business. I mean, that is short term, right?
Yeah.
And even half yearly, that's fine. So I don't think it's whether the ASX or whether it's
FTSE
any
or whatever.
index. They're all the same at the end of the day. If you're a listed company, you're a listed company. And there's good reason to be listed. And if I look at the businesses that I'm involved with, has it stopped Car Group doing anything? No, it hasn't, being listed. It's actually arguably helped us because the brand as car sales just has more credibility. But there's some companies I've been involved with over the years, and I probably won't name them, where I think, God, if you were private,
could have taken this off.
We definitely would have made better and different decisions. Afterpay Would it have been better served as a private company? Gee, it's hard to say that given how successful it was.
Yep.
But there was definitely moments we were making decisions thinking, oh, it'd be nice to do this privately. So it's horses for courses, I think.
Market softening out there, Pat, in Australia, in consumer land.
Yep.
Discretionary income's down, okay?
Yep.
You've talked about the good stuff of being a chair.
Mm.
We're anticipating a few CEOs might get encouraged to move on, all right?
Mm.
You had to make that call often?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Tough one.
Absolutely, yeah. I come back to the place of everybody's role in an organisation, particularly at senior levels, should be relatively clear, which is, at the end of the day, it's a bit like using a sporting analogy. Having the best players doesn't mean you get the title.
Correct.
Same in business. So it comes back to what's your vision and what are your plans to deliver on that vision? And whether you're in Goodman Fielder with the retailer asking you for their own brand and you're going, my God, that'll wipe 25% off our profits. Does that make the CEO a bad performer? No, not at all. So for me, it's all about, looking at leaders, CEOs in particular, you say, have they got a true, real vision for this company? Have they got a plan to deliver that vision? And have they surrounded themselves with people who are capable of it? And that, for me, is the sort of the triangle that I look at. And at the end of the day, again, like football coaches, sometimes you just get to a place where you run out of energy and steam and ideas, and it's your time. And I think most CEOs recognise that. I don't think it ever comes as a huge surprise to a CEO. Clearly, there are moments where an activist gets involved because they've got a completely different view on something. You deal with that situation. I've not had to deal with that, to be honest.
Any particular CEOs stand out, Pat?
For me?
Yeah, or leaders, may not even be the CEO.
Yeah, from a leadership perspective, I mean, I do always look at great sporting teams and wonder why. So it's hard not to look at the All Blacks and say, what was, I'm not saying it's gone, but definitely some of the shine's come off it. You know, what was it? Different coaches, different group of players, yet they had whatever the culture was that delivered, yeah? Much as I hate to say it, Manchester United, which a team I don't like a lot. Sir Alex.
Yep.
You look at that and you go, what was it? And you see that, the Beckham documentary and whatever else. He wasn't the most affable, likeable guy.
No.
Sir Alex, I mean.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, he got the best out of a group of players. And from a business perspective, I'll name a couple of people, and I don't mean to offend people by not naming them, but if I look at Afterpay and I look at Nick and Ant, incredible what they achieved. Absolutely incredible. But I also look at Alana Rubin, who was the chair, who most people wouldn't even know.
Mm.
And for Alana to get the balance right as the chair of that board was just, she did a tremendous job, an absolutely tremendous job. And it was all for me around communication. My learning from Alana was, it was all around the communication piece. We had 3 US-based directors. When I was on the board, there was 3 US-based directors, and there was Alana and I here in Australia. So we were doing all the heavy lifting on the governance stuff. And then you had Nick and Ant running the business. And they were changing executives regularly because we were just growing so quickly. We just had to find people who had done it at the next level, next level. And then I look at Cameron McIntyre at Car Group, and just because I've been around him for so long, to see him from that CFO that was recruited back out of Telstra to a guy who's now running a global business as a CEO, who I've no doubt gets lots of inbound calls from people like you, trying to get him to go run not just Australian businesses, but global businesses.
Yep.
To me, that's just a wonderful story to have been around. Their names that come to mind straight away.
2 last things I'm going to cover off. All this was at the age of 48 because you wanted to put some more time in sport, didn't you say? Mm-hmm. Well, what
yep,
sport?
So now I coach.
Okay, so what do you do?
So I coach women's rep soccer.
How good are they and what team?
So the team is called the Northern Tigers. So over the journey, I've coached the under-12s. I've coached first grade for a number of years. And at the moment, I'm coaching the under-18s. So we play in the New South Wales National Premier League. So if you're familiar with the A-League Women, the A-League Women is the professional league here in Australia. That league runs for a relatively short period. Half those players go offshore for the rest of the year, and the other half play in the National Premier League.
Why do you coach women?
Why?
Why women?
Yeah, good question. I've got 3 kids, a boy and 2 girls. The boy still plays. The middle child, who's a girl, played for Northern Tigers, which is where my association started with.
Ah, okay, right.
And my youngest daughter is more a dancer than she is a footballer, albeit she's done some football coaching, which she loves to tell me about, and the 16-0 losses that she coached over and how she held that all together. And yeah, that's where my passion came from in terms of coaching, was watching my son and my eldest daughter play. And I've just loved it. And I'm very fortunate that I could do it. Very fortunate. Yeah.
You see sporting cultures and elite performance. Do you actually see that type of culture in an organisation?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Where have you really seen it, Pat?
Car sales for sure. So
just rubs off on everyone?
Yeah. So what does Cameron do when he brings in his global leadership team into Sydney last week? They go to the Swans and they sit with John Longmire.
Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's so relevant to business, sport, politics. Arguably, could learn so much from business and from sports. At the end of the day, we're talking about people, and you're talking about leaders. I always say to people, talk about what a great leader's like, and I reckon, I have no idea, but I'll make it up.
Okay.
The majority of people will work 40 hours a week, most weeks, to pay the rent, pay the mortgage, whatever, yeah? And most of those people would like to at least get some pleasure out of that 40 hours rather than just feeling like, oh, here we go, we're going around again, yeah? So at the end of the day, if you work in an organisation that's got no vision, no passion, people who just are going through the motions, well, that can't be terribly exciting. That's a long day.
Yeah.
So creating environments where people feel a bit motivated, despite hard times, doesn't have to be working for Afterpay at the height of its. There were people there working 80-hour weeks. Were they exhausted? They were, but man, they were on the treadmill, and it was fantastic because they were going somewhere. They had a vision. They had leaders who were taking them on that journey. Same with sport. You look at the great leaders in sport, in my opinion, they create a culture where the players want to be there. They want to do their best for that team. That's what brings success, in my view.
So thinking about all those years back, and you're on the football field, and you're playing against that school with that school team, covered in mud, and then you're getting that opportunity to start the career in accounting. If you look back at that young man now, what advice would you give him?
Look, I'm incredibly fortunate. I've got a wonderful wife, great family, and I'm doing what I want to do. And like I said to you, I didn't plan any of that. It happened. I wouldn't change anything in terms of what I do. And I'll just say to them, just do what you did. No regrets.
On that, Pat, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Greg.
It's been a great pleasure.
Cheers.
You've been listening to No Limitations.